They're not flashy, they're not genetically enhanced, and they definitely don't have plot armor, but when the Imperium needs brute force, when it needs to grind heretics, Xenos, and traitors into dust, it calls on these. This is every Militarum tank explained. Light tanks hold a special niche in guard forces, especially since the mainline battle tanks get all the glory. But most light tanks operate in a very specific context that would be impossible for larger vehicles to manage and too dangerous for infantry. The Centaur is most often used to tow around artillery pieces, munitions, and crew, but it has also become the favorite mode of transportation for Krieg Grenadiers due to the vehicle's speed. The Centaur's 70 km/h off-road speed is from the pair of engines mounted to its track sponsons and a larger than normal power pack, making the Centaur a quick vehicle even when it's towing an emplacement around. When used in combat roles, the Centaur can be quickly modified to sweep mines, clear razor wire, and be up-armored for additional protection. There are also versions that have been environmentally sealed to operate alongside stormtroopers or drop regiments with the inclusion of cut-down autocannons to provide better fire support. The smallest and definitely cutest vehicle for today's video is the Cyclops demolition vehicle. The Cyclops is a small unmanned tracked vehicle which looks like a miniature Leman Russ, barely even coming up to the waist of the average guardsman. Although it is small and doesn't look very threatening, this remote-controlled vehicle is loaded with explosives and used to blow up bunkers and pillboxes. It's usually carried inside a Chimera, which brings it close to the target, then it just drives out and detonates. Okay, so we're stretching the term tank with this entry, but since it's based on the Chimera chassis, we thought it deserved a place here. This is the first variant of the Pegasus vehicle you'll see on our list today, and it was made in response to the need for a fast and light vehicle with some of the same punch as a Leman Russ. To accomplish this, a shortened Chimera body was fitted with a Leman Russ engine and put on 4 sturdy wheels to make an armored car. This vehicle has enough power to speed across difficult terrain and is typically armed with a turret-mounted multi-laser autocannon or twin-linked heavy bolter, with a hull-mounted heavy bolter or heavy flamer, giving the Pegasus AFV 360-degree firing arcs and the speed to hit and run effectively. The Siegfried was adapted from the Landcrawler agricultural vehicle and armed with a multi-laser to provide some tough fire support for Krieg units, and could supposedly move fairly fast on even ground. Every army needs armored personnel carriers to safely get their infantry and specialist squads to the thick of the fighting, and the Astra Militarum is no different, and since this is the 42nd millennium, many of these vehicles have at least as much firepower and armor as a light tank and have been used for close-range fire support when the need arises. The Chimera is one of the most iconic Militarum tanks ever fielded. It has shepherded squads of human soldiers to the front lines of battle for millennia and has been modified over and over ever since its introduction. Usually issued with some sort of heavy flamer or heavy bolter for close quarters protection and a multi-laser on a rotating turret, the Chimera also has a firing deck at the rear with installed lasguns which can be used by embarked troopers to help defend their transport from close assault. This makes the Chimera perfect for covering massed infantry and other light vehicles as well. This rugged and dependable vehicle is most commonly used as a transport, but it is also very often used by company commanders as a command tank thanks to its advanced communication systems and sturdy construction. It can even float if it has to. Outside of being an armored personnel carrier, the Chimera is also the chassis used for tanks like the Hellhound and several other vehicles with various functions. There have been a couple of variants throughout the years that have gone in and out of favor. We suggest you folks look up Chimerax, Chimodon, and Chimero for some really goofy examples. But there are very few vehicles based on the Chimera that fail, so expect to see a few more entries in this list that use the chassis. Command vehicles exist primarily to allow officers the protection needed to get closer to the fighting while still allowing them to formulate new plans in response to enemy action and support their troops. The Pegasus command vehicle takes the wheeled Pegasus armored car and removes the turret weapon in favor of an enhanced communication and sensor suite, but keeps the hull-mounted heavy bolter or heavy flamer for defense. The Pegasus moves so fast that its command variant has become popular for officers of faster-moving forces, especially light tank divisions. The ability to call artillery accurately and then zip back behind a wall of chimeras is undeniably useful. The Salamander Scout APC is also built upon the Chimera chassis and is much smaller and lighter. This is because, as the name suggests, they are meant to be used as quick recon units. They are the ones that usually rush into dangerous environments first in order to observe enemy deployments, and because of this, they usually work in pairs and are lightly armored to preserve speed over any other concerns. The command variant of this APC is what landed the Salamander on this list. The fighting platform is modified with extra armor to ensure the valuable command squad inside is safe, but otherwise it's almost the exact same as the Scout variant. The command tank is equipped with heavy weapons like heavy flamers and heavy bolters, but are primarily focused on communication duties as they have a full communication suite installed. In most conventional armies, self-propelled artillery wouldn't generally be considered tanks, but 40k always takes things to the next level, and the mobile artillery of the Militarum tend to have thick armor and defensive weaponry, making them perfect for keeping up with other tanks as well as defending themselves from assault. The Basilisk is a staple in every regiment of the Imperial Guard. They are equipped with an Earthshaker cannon, the standard artillery gun of the Imperium, and Basilisks mount the Earthshaker on a modified Chimera chassis and are primarily deployed for long and medium range bombardment. They are also usually fitted with a hull-mounted heavy bolter to deter infantry assaults. Together with the rest of their regiment, they provide suppressive barrages of 132mm shells, as they are not known for being very accurate. However, these artillery tanks are extremely mobile, and when deployed as a group, they are incredibly useful in breaking up enemy formations and in laying siege to enemy fortifications with a blanket of high explosive ammunitions. One of the oldest and rarest operational artillery units in the Astra Militarum, the Colossus Bombard is one of the heaviest mortars available. It is built around an extremely heavy siege mortar, which has such a slow fire rate that it's used mostly for breaking down heavily defended fortifications. The slow firing rate is entirely because of its ammunition, which is so heavy that it requires an automated crane to load them for the vehicle's operators. This pretty much locks the Bombard into being a backline unit, requiring other vehicles and infantry to protect them. The single largest threat when it comes to missile-based artillery is the Deathstrike missile launcher. This tank is armed with one intercontinental missile that is capable of hitting targets across the planet from the launcher. This Chimera-based tank has access to extremely dangerous munitions and is considered such a menace on the battlefield that they are used only in the most extreme of cases and require a demanding set of authorizations and processes before they are cleared for deployment. The Deathstrike missiles themselves have a variety of devastating payloads, from the standard plasma warhead that vaporizes targets to pathogens, Titan killers, and rare vortex missiles that blast small holes directly into the warp. Considered to be the most frequently deployed artillery unit to ever be developed for the Chimera chassis, the Griffon Heavy Mortar is a close to medium-range mortar support unit that has become embroiled in some controversy that threatens the Griffon with extinction. The issue relies mainly on the size of its heavy mortar. Many commanders believe it's too small to warrant being mounted on a vehicle, and so, as a regiment loses their Griffons to attrition and enemy action, they're not being replaced, leading to them being manufactured less and less on Forge Worlds across the Imperium. The Imperial Guard's standard in anti-air defense, the Hydra flak tank, is yet another Militarum vehicle that was based on the Chimera chassis. Operated by a team of 5, the Hydra bears 4 heavy caliber autocannons that fire high explosive rounds at incredible speeds. This is supplemented by the usual hull-mounted heavy bolter, which aids in defending against ground forces that might try to ambush the vehicle. Similarly, a variation on the Hydra called the Wyvern also makes use of the Chimera frame. But while the Hydra is focused on anti-air defense, the Wyvern removes the heavy autocannons in favor of a pair of twin-linked mortars. This shifts the focus of the tank towards crowds of infantry, making them excellent area denial weapons, and they're able to take out large groups of foot sloggers from a distance. The Manticore missile tank has made a name for itself as one of the most versatile long-range weapon systems in the armory. Being a missile-launching tank and equipped with their quad Manticore missile launchers, they can be used as long-range artillery support or as an anti-air unit. The key to this tank's effectiveness is the Manticore missiles, which can be configured 2 different ways. Storm Eagle rockets are calibrated to fire extremely accurate warheads that are typically high explosive cluster munitions, but can also be loaded with incendiary or chemical payloads. The Sky Eagles, on the other hand, are heat-seeking high explosive warheads designed to lock onto and track fast-moving aerial targets. The main downside of these support vehicles is that once the rockets or missiles have been fired, they can take hours to reload. This means that they have to be withdrawn to be reloaded, and as a result are sometimes equipped with close quarters weapons such as heavy flamers in case they are chased off the battlefield. One of the oldest artillery support units is the Medusa siege tank, a cannon platform that has sadly begun to show its age. They were actually introduced in the Great Crusade as a Space Marine artillery piece, as the cannon's relatively short range was less of a problem when protected by the superhuman warriors of the Astartes legions. Their use is extremely specialized and is not armored enough to really survive being close enough to the fighting like other siege tanks, and its shells are so huge that it can take a long time to load, and it can't keep many shells in its hoppers. But even considering its shortcomings, it is still used in the 41st millennium when the job calls for a unit able to break down fortifications, and they are considered so good at this role that it is not uncommon for commanders to have a group of them standing by for when they enter a siege against a well-supplied enemy. The Minotaur is one of the oldest tanks on this list, with artwork from some of the older temples on Terra clearly depicting its use long before the Great Crusade. Clearly made for more brutal conflicts, the Minotaur is much more heavily armored than its smaller Basilisk cousin, with its two Earthshaker cannons being housed in a sealed cabin on a chassis that seems closely related to the Malcador heavy tank. Truthfully, the Minotaur would likely be a relic of the past if about 100 of them hadn't been found in the deep vaults of Vrax during the conflict named after that world. A group of traders found the old tanks and used them to great effect before many were recaptured by loyalists. It's not likely that the Minotaur will see much more use, however, as the Basilisk is clearly superior regardless of its smaller size. Mainline battle tanks are the bread and butter of any armored force. Massive cannons, support weapons, and heavy armor are the hallmarks of vehicles in this section, and it's something the Astra Militarum does particularly well. Our next pair of vehicles are closely tied together. These are the Destroyer Tank Hunter and the Thunderer Siege Tank. Both units are based on the Leman Russ, yet are so heavily modified that they aren't considered to be variants. Both tanks lack the turret on the top of the chassis and instead build their main weapon directly into the hull of the tank for stability. The Destroyer does this with a powerful laser destroyer which can cripple tanks of just about any size, while the Thunderer is equipped with a massive Demolisher cannon similar to an Astartes Vindicator. The destroyer pattern, however, has slowly fallen out of favor as the laser destroyer weapon is difficult to replace. The Thunderer pattern, meanwhile, sees limited usage supporting regular Leman Russ demolishers, and since neither tank has a turret, they are better suited for urban combat where turrets can be easy targets for ambushes. To say that the Hellhound is built on the Chimera chassis doesn't seem to do it much justice, as the Hellhound and its variants are so close in form that they could legitimately be called subclasses of the original APC. So far, all the tanks we have covered use big cannons or laser weapons to destroy the enemies of humanity, but the Hellhound, as its name might suggest, prefers to enter the battlefield with a massive flamer known as an Inferno Cannon, becoming the stuff of nightmares for infantry formations across the galaxy. But its large Promethium-filled fuel tank has proven to be a tempting target for anti-tank weapons, making it a very dangerous assignment for Militarum tank crews. As you could imagine, this sort of application has a couple of variants, namely the Banewolf and the Devil Dog. The Banewolf exchanges the Hellhound's Inferno Cannon for a Chem Cannon, spreading noxious clouds of gas that dissolve organic material on contact. Whenever Banewolves are deployed, it requires a regiment's commissariat to enforce extra discipline, as any mishaps are likely to cause massive casualties among friendly troops. The Devil Dog, however, operates on a different philosophy. Instead of bringing mass destruction to infantry, it enters battles with a Melta-Cannon, using its speed to outflank enemy armor formations and deliver short-range Melta-Blasts that make quick work of even heavy armor plating. The Leman Russ battle tank is so beloved by both in-universe commanders and players of 40k alike that it deserved its own entry on our list. It's safe to say that there is not a single other vehicle that has more cultural importance to this hobby than the Leman Russ. This tank was named after the Primarch of the Space Wolves, Leman Russ, for both the tank's sheer ferocity in combat and the fact that it was the Space Wolves who discovered the STC during the Great Crusade. From the very moment the tank's design was discovered, it became the backbone of the Imperial Army, replacing the aging Malcador heavy tank. The Leman Russ has been fielded by the most poorly equipped of militias and planetary defense forces to the mighty Solar Auxilia and every regiment that came after. This is arguably the most successful tank ever fielded by the Imperium, as it can operate in nearly every environment, is quick and easy to produce, reliable, and easy to convert or modify. With an engine that can be fueled with nearly any combustible substance known to the galaxy, it's no wonder that even today the Leman Russ is seen fighting in literally every war zone the Imperium fights in. With such a long service record and being in production galaxy-wide on millions of Hive Forge worlds, the Leman Russ has many variants and different weapons options. The basic Leman Russ battle tank is armed with a turret-mounted battle cannon and will typically have a pair of sponsons on its flanks that are fitted with heavy bolters or heavy flamers, but can really be fitted with almost anything, including multi-meltas and las cannons, and this also applies to its hull-mounted gun. The battle cannon, however, is the main attraction. It is a 120mm smoothbore gun with a water-cooled jacket and is capable of firing a variety of munitions, from high explosive to armor-piercing and even in furnace rounds. The Leman Russ has 8 known variants aside from the standard, and these are defined by their typical loadout, but are so well known that they're important to list here. The Leman Russ Annihilator is a highly effective tank hunter, replacing the battle cannon for a set of twin-linked las cannons. The Annihilator was introduced around M37 and would be mostly used in war zones with high attrition rates for tanks, as it's easier to produce when compared to tank hunter variants. Although most regiments prefer to use them defensively, the Death Corps of Krieg are notable fans of the Annihilator and use them in many frontal assaults against enemy defenses, using the piercing las cannons to crack open bunker systems and tank formations. The Conqueror would downsize its battle cannon, exchanging damage for a faster speed and higher firing rate, with a top speed of 24 km per hour on open terrain compared to the regular variant's 21 km per hour. Although it was expected to perform poorly, the Conqueror would be first field tested by the Scutari of Griffon 4, where its increased speed allowed it to keep up with advancing Titan formations and also managed to outmaneuver the enemy. After this successful field test in M38, the Conqueror would be handed over to the Imperial Guard, who would use it as a breakthrough tank to quickly smash apart enemy formations. Among the tank regiments of the Imperium, the Conqueror is considered a true cavalry tank. The Demolisher is the second most common Leman Russ variant, swapping its battle cannon for a Demolisher cannon designed for siege warfare. With its short barrel, it has become a favorite for urban warfare, although it's sometimes edged out by the sturdy Thunderer tank. As befitting of any siege tank, the Demolisher is upgraded with layered ceramite armor, and its side sponsons often being geared towards clearing out trenches with heavy flamers. The Demolisher is also one of a few Leman Russ tanks to incorporate autoloaders for its massive shells, something that the crew definitely appreciates. The Leman Russ Eradicator rolls into battle with a powerful Nova cannon. Using highly volatile shells, the Eradicator is best used for supporting infantry in cities or jungles, where its powerful main cannon can destroy just about any bunker or fortification and the enemy infantry huddled inside. However, such incredible firepower does come with a risk, as some Nova Cannon shells may explode while being loaded, a risk that Imperial officers considered to be justified for the tank's effectiveness. If the Eradicator isn't risky enough for you, then look no further than the Leman Russ Executioner and its Plasma Destroyer. Although it was a popular choice during the Great Crusade, with some tank regiments exclusively using this temperamental variant, in the 41st millennium it has become a rare sight on the battlefield. While Plasma is notoriously dangerous, the Executioner at least tries to counteract this with several safety features such as emergency vents to disperse plasma heat and shielding screens for the crew just in case the vents melt under the strain. Armed with a set of twin-linked autocannons, the Exterminator is an ideal tool for fighting massed infantry like orcs and Tyranids. It has also become renowned as a strangely effective reconnaissance vehicle. But what truly sets the Exterminator apart from every other Leman Russ is that it is the favorite of the Space Wolves chapter, who on rare occasions still use it alongside their Predators and Land Raiders to reinforce their tank formations. The Punisher differs from the Exterminator by including heavier armor, so that it may engage the enemy in a more aggressive, close-quarter manner, since its devastating Punisher Gatling cannon is much more effective at that range, and its sponson mounts are often equipped with plasma guns or heavy flamers. Although its lack of anti-tank weaponry does leave the Punisher vulnerable when dueling other armored vehicles, it makes up for this with sheer anti-infantry firepower. Out of all the Leman Russ tanks in use by the Imperium, few match the legendary Vanquisher. This Leman Russ puts all other variants to shame with its massive Vanquisher cannon, which turns the tank into an apex tank hunter. Unfortunately, tragedy would strike an M35 when orcs overran the main forge world which produced the Vanquisher cannon, resulting in the Imperium having an ever-dwindling supply of the guns. Although efforts were made to redesign the cannon and begin production of new Vanquishers, these attempts have not been enough to make a meaningful dent in the ever-increasing demands of the Administratum. For now, the Vanquisher remains in exclusive use among officers and only the best of tank crews. By far the most unique Leman Russ variant, the Incinerator was used exclusively during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy by the Solar Auxilia, the elite of the Imperial Army. Processing a rare and powerful Volkite demi-culverin, the Incinerator would literally microwave entire infantry formations in seconds. Unfortunately, like all Volkite weapons, they are nearly non-existent in the modern era aside from Belisarius Cahl's Neo-Volkite weaponry, or a select few Astartes pistols, leaving us to speculate if there ever might be a Neo-Incinerator tank. Strangely, heavy tanks are not often seen in Militarum formations, with guard commanders preferring either to mass Leman Russ variants or to skip the middleman and go straight for super heavy Baneblades. Regardless, there are several of these large vehicles still in operation, and they are just effective as they were in the early years of the Imperium. The Crassus, named after Lord Solar Macharius' greatest general Borgon Crassus, is the second biggest troop transport on treads within the Imperium. The STC for this enormous transport was recovered from a destroyed Forge World, and immediately the Crassus was in high demand, as it can deliver an entire platoon of guardsmen to a given objective without taking any meaningful casualties. The Crassus also possesses a uniquely powerful engine for its size, allowing it to be heavily armored and deliver troops at top speeds to their destination. With 4 heavy bolter sponsons and a pintle-mounted storm bolter or heavy stubber, it's no slouch against mass infantry either. However, the Crassus still requires the aid of other tanks for heavy defense, and few are as capable in this department as its fire support variant, the Praetor Armored Assault Launcher, which exchanges its troop compartment with the Praetor Launcher, delivering a variety of warheads against ground-based targets and even some airborne ones. The Praetor is the perfect partner for any assault with the Crassus. Now, if the Crassus is not quite big enough for you, there is also the Gorgon Armored Assault Transport, which ditches armor to bring a staggering 50 guardsmen into battle. Lightly armed and armored, the Gorgon might be huge, but it's not meant to stand up to any serious counterattacks. It only has 2 turrets that are typically equipped with twin-linked heavy stubbers, heavy bolters, heavy flamers, or mortars. The Gorgon is intended for use in siege warfare by exploiting recently created breaches. Even its ramp is designed to make the crossing of trenches easy. It's even got strong amphibious capabilities should there be a river or moat to cross. However, the Gorgon does have a glaring weakness. It is fully open-topped. Therefore, the Gorgon is only used when enemy artillery is thoroughly suppressed. With the enemies of humanity closing in and the limitations involved with producing the super heavy Baneblade, Imperial commanders needed an alternative that could fulfill some of the same battlefield roles. In response, the Mechanicus pulled together scraps of old blueprints from the Great Crusade and developed the Macharius heavy tank, named after the legendary Lord Commander Solar Macharius, Space Alexander the Great essentially. We'll have to do a video on him later. This heavy tank certainly outclasses the Leman Russ in armor and firepower, as the base Macharius includes a set of 2 battle cannons, hull-mounted twin-linked heavy stubbers, and a pair of side sponsons that can mount the usual array of heavy weaponry. Similar to the Leman Russ, there are a couple of Macharius variants following the same battlefield roles. The Macharius Vanquisher provides insane anti-tank power with 2 Vanquisher cannons. The Macharius Vulcan and Omega, however, take a step closer to what some Baneblade variants do, such as deploying a Vulcan Mega Bolter or the Omega Pattern Plasma Blast Guns, two highly destructive and potent weapons that would otherwise only be used on Titans. As previously mentioned, the Leman Russ came to replace the previous main battle tank of the Imperium during the Great Crusade, which seems to have been the Malcador heavy tank, named after none other than the Emperor's best friend, Malcador the Sigillite. Malcador is truly ancient, with its origins reaching back into the shadowy age of strife. Unlike the Leman Russ, the Malcador was a favorite of the Astartes and saw heavy use throughout the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. But afterwards, it would grow to become a rare sight on the battlefield as the Leman Russ became more prominent and the Astartes moved on to tanks like the Predator. One of the reasons for its replacement was the notorious issues with its engine, which made for a slow tank, with an off-road top speed of only 18 km per hour. It was also difficult to repair once it started to fall out of favor. Some regiments continue to use these venerable tanks regardless of the difficulties, most notably the Krieg regiments, who don't mind the lack of speed and love the heavier armor plating. The baseline Malcador was fitted with a battle cannon, sponson-mounted heavy stubbers, and a hull-mounted heavy bolter or las cannon. And just like with newer tanks, there were variants. For instance, there was a Vanquisher pattern. But with the previously mentioned lack of Vanquisher cannon production, this pattern has become fully extinct, as any cannons produced are earmarked for the Leman Russ or Macharius tanks. Another is the Valdor, and it's perhaps the Imperium's most formidable and oldest tank hunter, named after the first Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. The Valdor saw a rise to fame after the Horus Heresy, where its powerful neutron laser projector was used to devastate entire tank formations of land raiders used by the traitor legions. Another heavily armored behemoth, the Ragnarok, manages to stand out as it was developed during the Krieg Civil War, where a simpler to produce tank was required as Leman Russ chassis began to grow rarer and rarer as the war passed on. And so a boxy design that traded speed for armor and ease of upkeep was born. The Ragnarok was a true marvel of its time, perfectly suited for hostile environments and trench warfare. It was fitted with its own version of a battle cannon, a hull-mounted las cannon, and support weapons like heavy stubbers and heavy bolters. It's honestly just a bigger version of the Siegfried from the light tank section, and once the planet of Krieg rejoined the Imperium, the Ragnarok would be recommissioned by other regiments, such as the Baron Siege Masters, who lovingly call it the Mark I Mobile Bunker. The second tank on our list, named after a Primarch, the Rogal Dorn, is a rather new sight on the battlefield and provides a better stopgap between the Leman Russ and Macharius without having the engine issues of the Malcador. While the exact origins of the Rogal Dorn are unknown, it has more than earned its reputation as an excellent mobile firing platform that also provides great cover for infantry. Able to keep up with the Leman Russ, it provides an unparalleled amount of flexible firepower for a tank its size. Typically equipped with twin battle cannons or a single powerful oppressor cannon, the Rogal Dorn can also be fitted with numerous heavy stubbers, autocannons, heavy bolters, meltaguns, and even the option between an infantry shredding Castigator Gatling cannon or a bunker-busting pulverizer cannon. It's a versatile tank and a worthy successor to the Leman Russ, although some commanders who adopted the vehicle early on reported that it was often delivered without a floor. It's time for the legendary Baneblade, a literal rolling fist of destruction and firepower. While we have covered heavy tanks that could almost compete with the Baneblade, this tank is in a class of its own as one of the Imperium's most renowned and one of its only surviving super heavy tanks. Back during the days of the Horus Heresy and Great Crusade, even the Space Marine legions made use of the Baneblade and its many variants. The Baneblade bristles with 11 barrels of hell in the form of heavy bolters, las cannons, autocannons, and a single Demolisher cannon, which is treated as secondary to the 10-meter-long Baneblade cannon, which is capable of launching its rocket-assisted munitions towards enemies that can be kilometers away. It requires a crew of a dozen people to fully operate this Goliath of a tank, and just its presence alone can elevate the morale of any Imperial Guard regiment while terrifying enemies into submission. The Banehammer has surprisingly remained an unpopular choice of super heavy until the outbreak of the Tyranic Wars, where it has become a favorite of many Imperial Guard commanders to combat the endless swarms of Tyranids. Banehammers replace the normal turret and Demolisher cannon with a tremor cannon on a fixed armored housing. A tremor cannon fires munitions that don't kill on the explosion, but rather with a huge ground-shaking shockwave that has been seen literally liquefying infantry caught in its blast. The Shadowsword is the community's favorite variant of the Baneblade, as it replaces most of the Baneblade's weapons for a singular volcano cannon. With this Titan-class laser cannon, and often fielded in squadrons of 3, the Shadowsword hunts enemy super heavies such as Chaos Titans and Bio-Titans, and although a single shot may not outright kill a Titan, the combined firepower of multiple vehicles is enough to make any god engine think twice before engaging. The Hellhammer is probably the least modified variant of the Baneblade, as it only replaces the Baneblade's battle cannon for the Hellhammer cannon, which has proven superior at providing close fire support and exterminating enemy defenders and their fortifications. The subatomic charges fired by the Hellhammer cause a miniature nuclear explosion upon impact, evaporating anything dumb enough to try hunkering in bunkers or ruined buildings. For obvious reasons, the Hellhammer is most often used in city fighting, where it can effectively be used to clear large areas of potential ambush sites. The Stormlord, similar to the Shadowsword, is equipped with a weapon that is otherwise mounted on Titans, namely the Vulcan Megabolter. This gives the Stormlord the ability to completely brush aside massed infantry and light vehicles in a storm of mass reactive shells. Notably, however, the Stormlord is also capable of acting as a troop transport, with the ability to carry up to 40 guardsmen into battle, delivering not only thousands of bullets but also dozens of guardsmen right into the enemy trench system. The Banesword, which is derived from the Shadowsword, replaces the Volcano Cannon for a Quake Cannon, and while a Quake Cannon can certainly be used to hunt Titans, the Banesword typically hunts fortresses. The most terrifying part of the Quake Cannon is that each shell fired contains a fragment of a planet which was destroyed by Exterminatus, which Imperials believe empowers each shell with a small measure of that planet-killing power, perfect for cracking open the stubborn defenses of anyone standing in the way of the Emperor's light. Given the Shadowsword's popularity, it's no surprise that Militarum commanders need additional ways to counter enemy Titans, especially when they don't have allied Titans for support. To that end, the Doomhammer swaps the long-range Volcano Cannon for a Magma Cannon, a shorter-ranged laser cannon with a much tighter beam radius. This change means that the Doomhammer needs to ambush any Titan it wants to handle. However, the smaller range and effect radius means the tank needs less capacitors, and so can be used to transport troops while covering them, a compromise that proved useful during the 1,000-year siege of Ordana, where the Doomhammer was invented. The Stormblade is another Titan hunting super heavy which engages its enemies with a plasma blast gun. Designed by the priests on Ryza, the Stormblade sadly lacks some of the advanced features of the Shadowsword, yet during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, it remained popular with the Space Marine legions, as its plasma weaponry was perfect for taking out enemy Astartes forces. The Stormsword is another siege tank, yet in this case it's actually an unapproved modification by the Imperial Guard to make a formidable street-fighting super heavy with a shorter barrel. The Stormsword is built from salvaged Shadow Swords, but it remains a devastating weapon. With a single shot, it can bring down entire buildings, and unlike the standard Volcano Cannon, its turret can rotate freely without the risk of accidentally leveling a city block. Our final Baneblade variant for today's video is the Stormhammer. Unlike the previous tanks, the Stormhammer's intended purpose is that of an exploration vehicle rather than a battle tank or dedicated Titan killer. It is capable of fully operating in seas of lava, toxic winds, and even acidic-filled skies. The Stormhammer would also serve as a command tank for many units of the Solar Auxilia and is equipped with even more weapons than the typical Baneblade. A Stormhammer cannon on the turret, 2 battle cannons, 7 multi-lasers, a las cannon, and even a heavy flamer or heavy bolter to round out its infantry defenses. It's a very rare vehicle, typically only used by the forces of the Mechanicus, and you can definitely tell that it's meant to operate perfectly fine on its own. Although some of the previously stated tanks are comparable to rolling fortresses, there are few that truly embrace that title more than the Capital Imperialis. Coming in at an impressive 67,000 tons and sporting 6 Void Shield generators, it is the only tank to rival a Titan in size. It comes with a variety of anti-tank and infantry weapons, but it also possesses multiple defense lasers and a behemoth cannon which can cause landslides just from its recoil. The capital Imperialis is used as a rolling command fortress and even has its own workshops for the Adeptus Mechanicus and a chapel to venerate the god emperor within. It can hold 2 full companies of guard, which is on average roughly 300 soldiers each, including their tanks. The capital is mostly used as a mobile defensive position on worlds with hostile environments or in conflicts where it has plenty of support from the super heavy tanks or titans. They are certainly tanks, but they're not really used in that way. However, the capital Imperialis was too 40k not to have at least a mention here. Well, that was one of our biggest lists, and we didn't even talk about every vehicle the Minotaur has access to. We hope you enjoyed this blitz of 40k's most iconic armored vehicles, and we'd love to hear what you thought. Do you think we need to go more in depth with the Leman Russ, or maybe you want to hear about other vehicles like the many flyers of the Imperium? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can load your cannon with more lore.